Have you ever found yourself staring out the window of your child's home, feeling like a visitor in your own life? That moment when you realize the walls protecting you have somehow become the same ones confining you? Living with your children can feel safe and comforting, until one day, you notice you've stopped making your own choices. And by then, the path back to who you once were feels impossibly distant, like trying to recall a dream that slips further away with each waking moment. Today, we're going to talk about something many people feel but rarely put into words: the invisible cost of surrendering your independence when you move in with your children. This insight might shift the way you see your current life or the one ahead. And once you hear it, you won't be able to unhear it. Let me tell you about Eleanor. At 72, Eleanor had been living alone for 5 years after her husband Robert passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. At first, their modest 2-bedroom apartment felt like a museum of grief frozen in time, filled with the absence of a voice. But slowly, over time, it became her sanctuary, a quiet space filled with little pieces of herself, the books she had finally started reading, her collection of ceramic birds from decades of travel, and photographs from their long adventures across Europe, Asia, and South America, and the piano. That was the center of everything. She could play whenever inspiration struck, sip her tea precisely how she liked it, 7 minutes steeped, just a hint of honey, no schedule, no judgment, just her rhythm, her space. Her days were soft. Mornings with a newspaper and crossword, afternoons volunteering at the local library, evenings with her piano or a good book. Not dramatic, but deeply, quietly her own. Then one cold February morning, Eleanor slipped on ice and fractured her hip. Her daughter Melissa insisted she move in. "Mom, it just makes sense," Melissa said. "We have the guest room downstairs, and I'll sleep easier knowing you're safe. The doctor said it'll take months to recover, and you can't do that alone." It was logical, kind, practical. And Eleanor remembered the guilt she carried about her own mother spending her final years in a nursing home. She had promised herself and her children she'd never be that kind of burden. And the idea of being close to Sophie and Jamie, her 12 and 10-year-old grandchildren, warmed her in a way she hadn't expected. The first few weeks felt like a little holiday, a disruption to her patterns, but a pleasant one. Sophie whispered teenage secrets in her ear. Jamie showed off every video game victory. Melissa cooked meals that Eleanor would never have made for herself. The laundry was magically done. Her medications appeared beside her breakfast. "You just focus on healing, Mom," Melissa said, fluffing her pillows. "Let us handle the rest." Eleanor smiled, grateful. But as the days passed, she began to wonder what healing really meant. Because healing doesn't always look like rest. And sometimes what feels like kindness can quietly ask you to shrink, to stay quiet, to become easier to love. If you've ever felt that shift, that slow drift from comfort to invisibility, you're not alone. That's what we explore here. If these words echo something you've carried in silence, you're in the right place. Feel free to subscribe. We talk about the truths most people don't say out loud, especially after 60. But as Eleanor's hip healed, something else began to fracture, something harder to name. She found herself tiptoeing around the family's routines, around their volume, around their time. She stopped playing the piano because homework required quiet, and David, her son-in-law, often worked from home. She ate dinner at 6 p.m., 2 hours earlier than she preferred, because that's when everyone else did. Her long morning ritual with the newspaper and coffee shrank to hurried glances between packing lunches and school drop-offs. Even her birds, the ones she had carefully wrapped and moved, remained boxed up in the garage. "Just until we find a safer place for them," Melissa had said. But the conversation never came again. Eleanor's life became a gentle performance of gratitude, a series of micro-adjustments, tiny disappearances. "It's the least I can do," she told herself at night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. "They opened their home. They've rearranged everything for me. I don't want to disturb the balance." But in trying not to disturb, she stopped existing. With every quiet compromise, she lost a thread of who she had been. Not in a dramatic, visible way, but like rain slowly wearing down stone. And then, the question came. Next, we'll talk about the silent thief that steals your independence piece by piece. You might not even notice it's happening until one day you wake up and don't recognize your own voice. You won't want to miss what comes next. Eleanor's bookshelf remained untouched. The novels gathered dust. Her ceramic birds stayed in their boxes, too fragile, Melissa said. Her piano played only when the house was empty. Her thoughts filtered before spoken. Her opinions left unsaid, especially when they didn't align with David and Melissa. "I just don't want to cause any waves," she whispered into the phone one night to her oldest friend, Margaret. "They're doing so much already. Who am I to question anything?" Margaret said nothing, but the silence said everything. The hardest part wasn't the loss of space or routine. It was the emotional silence. The way her voice softened, the way her presence dimmed, the way she held herself back even when asked for her thoughts. She became helpful when needed, invisible when not. She told herself it was love, but love shouldn't require disappearance. And if the word invisible resonates with something you felt, just type it in the comments. That one word. I read every single one. And sometimes putting it into words is the first step toward becoming visible again. One evening in late summer, Eleanor sat outside as the sun painted the sky in soft tones of amber and rose. It was the only time of day when she felt completely alone with her thoughts. The world slowed. The house, full of rhythm not her own, fell quiet. Then Jamie came outside and sat beside her, quiet unusually so. He picked at the grass, then said, "Grandma, why don't you play the piano anymore? Dad said you used to teach music and that you played at concerts and everything." The question cut through her like light through fog. Jamie had never truly heard her play. Not the Chopin nocturnes that once stirred tears in recital halls, not the jazz runs she crafted in her 60s, not even the simple pieces she had written for her students. He didn't know that version of her at all. "I used to play every day," she said softly, her voice catching. "It was like breathing to me." Jamie turned to her, frowning in that honest, unfiltered way only children can. "So, why did you stop breathing?" She had no answer she could give, nothing that wouldn't make him carry the weight of adult grief too early. She simply placed her hand gently on his and offered a quiet smile. But inside, something shifted. It wasn't just sadness, it was recognition. A question had been asked that could no longer be buried. If not now, then when? If not for me, then for whom? The next morning, long before anyone else stirred, Eleanor rose with a stillness that felt deliberate. The house was quiet, sacred. She made her coffee slowly, the old-fashioned way, savoring each moment as if she were waking not just herself, but a version of her that had been asleep for months. And then, coffee in hand, she approached the piano, the upright she had insisted on bringing. Even when Melissa said it might not match the aesthetic, she sat, placed her cup on the side table, and opened the lid. Her fingers hovered above the keys, hesitant, reverent. The feel of the ivory brought tears to her eyes. Her breath deepened. And then she played Debussy's Clair de Lune. It was halting at first, her hands unsure. But as the melody built, something long buried inside her stirred awake. The music grew fuller. The house, previously quiet with control, was now filled with something uncontrolled and real. She didn't stop when she heard footsteps above, didn't shrink when Melissa appeared in the doorway, or when David glanced at his watch. She played through it all, for herself. When the final note hung in the air, the silence that followed was thick, holy. Jamie was the first to speak. "That was awesome, Grandma. Will you teach me?" She looked at him. Her eyes softened. "Yes," she said. "I think I will." That afternoon, Eleanor did something she'd never done in Melissa's home. She asked for a family meeting. They gathered around the table, Melissa, David, Jamie, Sophie. Eleanor sat with her hands folded, her voice steady but quiet. "I want to thank you," she began, "for everything you've done. The care, the meals, the space. But I've lost something important along the way. I've lost myself." Melissa's face fell. "I thought you were happy here," she said, eyes glistening. "I've tried so hard to make you comfortable." Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. "You have. But that's just it. We're all trying so hard. You're afraid of doing too little, and I'm afraid of asking for too much. We're walking on eggshells, and no one is breathing." There was silence. And then, surprisingly, David spoke. "It's like when I started working from home," he said. "Everyone tiptoed around me, and I tiptoed around them. We didn't function well until we stopped pretending and started being honest." In the weeks that followed, small changes took root. First, ceramic birds came out of storage. Sophie helped place them carefully in the living room. "They're too beautiful to stay in boxes," she said. Jamie's piano lessons began every Tuesday. The music returned, not perfect, not polished, but real, alive, part of the household. Eleanor started a book club, once a month in the dining room. And more than that, she started speaking again gently, but clearly. She no longer filtered every word. But the most surprising shift was yet to come. After long conversations with Margaret and quiet reflection, Eleanor made a decision. "I'm going to look for a place of my own," she said. Melissa stared. "You're moving out?" Just nearby. A small apartment. I want to visit often, but I also want to wake up in a space that's mine, where I can play piano at midnight, where I can leave a book open and find it exactly as I left it. But won't you be lonely? Eleanor smiled. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Right now, I feel lonely because I've shrunk to fit into someone else's world. I don't want to shrink anymore. 6 months later, she moved into a bright one-bedroom apartment, 5 minutes away. Her ceramic birds lined the shelves. Her piano sat by the window. The calendar on the fridge listed Sunday dinners, Jamie's lessons, Sophie's volleyball, and her own watercolor class. But the most noticeable change wasn't the space, it was Eleanor herself. She showed up at family dinners full of stories. She spoke with energy. She didn't wait to be invited into conversations. She belonged again to herself. "You seem younger," David said one night. "Not younger," she replied. "More present." Jamie saw it too. "Grandma," he said during a lesson, "you seem happier now." Eleanor smiled. "Because I remembered something, sweetheart. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's how you stay real for the people you love. You can't pour from an empty cup. And mine was running dry." The ancient Buddhists say that true love nurtures freedom. That love which suffocates isn't love, it's fear disguised as care. Eleanor didn't learn that from books. She lived it. She discovered that family and independence aren't opposites. That love can grow where honesty lives. That becoming whole again isn't a betrayal of other sides, a return to self. And if that truth speaks to something inside you, she found herself again. Now what if you could keep that version of yourself strong and vibrant for decades longer? There are 3 small daily habits after 65 that could help you do just that, and even live past 90. You'll find them in the next video. Don't miss it.